Hi fellow artists, my name is Lauren. I'm the artist behind Potato Art Studios, and in today's video I'll be demonstrating how I do color adjustments with my photos in Affinity Photo. So if you're interested in seeing how I do some basic color correction, just keep on watching. So this video is actually the second part in a mini series I'm doing, which features a drawing I did of my bird Craig, which you see on the screen here. The first video is mainly focusing on how to correct for perspective distortion. So basically, if you don't take a picture with your camera or phone exactly in front of your drawing or your piece of art, I do a quick demo which I'll link in the upper right hand corner and also down below in the description box if you'd like to see how I work around that. So in this video we're focusing on how I do some basic color correction for all of my drawings. Right here on the screen I have two photos. The picture on the left is a photo I took of Craig, normal sunny day, but the photo was taken with the drawing sitting in the shade, so it did not have direct sunlight hitting it. And this is usually the best conditions to take your photos. And the one on the right is the file I ended up with after I did my perspective distortion demo. And I deliberately took this picture on a cloudy day so that you can see how I'm going to work from the right hand photo to get the left hand photo results. So you can see, just comparing them side by side, how much a difference lighting can make. Having overcast lighting usually gives it the artwork a bit of a blue or gray tint to it, and the overall brightness is not as good. But the key thing I want to point out is that do not adjust your colors so that it doesn't accurately reflect what your drawing looks like. So basically, do not lie. Do not lie about your colors. So for example, a lot of posts I see on the internet, the colors are obscenely oversaturated and the contrast is ridiculous. And the reason why younger artists typically do this is because they want to have their artwork stand out, but when you apply filters in such a way that it does not accurately reflect your drawing, you're basically lying to people that you are able to create something of that vibrancy and saturation. So although color adjustment is perfectly fine to do on a daily basis, do not adjust your colors to the point where it no longer accurately reflects your materials and your ability, because that is lying, and you never want to put a false front of what you're capable of. You want to share as accurately as possible what you can produce. So that's just a side note that I really want to point out in the very beginning of this video. So do not oversaturate your colors. Your goal is to, with color adjustment, is to make your digital file of your drawing appear as closely as it can to what it looks like in real life. So with that out of the way, we're going to get into the color adjustment. So I'm going to minimize my files here, and this is the file that we ended up after the end of the video I shared a few weeks ago. I use Affinity Photo. If you use a different photo editing program, it'll probably look a little bit different, but the color adjustment options are very standard among all photo editing platforms. So it might be in a slightly different location than what I have on my screen here, but you should be able to find a similar adjustment layer in your program. My available adjustment options on the left hand side here, and I basically go right down the row or right down the column, and I will do several adjustments consistently between all photos, and some are I will use only in specific cases. So I'm going to go down the column and we'll talk about each one. So the first adjustment layer is levels. And levels mainly deals with the whites and the darks. So on Craig here, I know for a fact that I took this photo in slightly darker than ideal conditions because it was very overcast and rainy that week. So I know that I will have to adjust this white level, which is the second bar to the left, to make it brighter. So I'm going to pull it a little bit to the left. And you can see already that it's made a huge difference. I'll pull the black level a little bit over to the right to darken up his eyes and his nails and the shadow under his wing, but not too much, just a little bit. So you can see on my levels there, the black is only adjusted 3%, but the white level has been adjusted quite a bit more, from 100 to 82%. And you're going to have to find a balance between these two parameters, and you can see I can play with the white level a lot, and you can see how much of the drawing is affected. But you never want to go too far in any extreme direction. So the next adjustment I'll do is white balance. And as I said before, for overcast weather, the tint you get on your pictures is typically a blue or gray tint. And so on this first bar here, because I know that the overcast weather made it a little bit more blue, we're going to pull it a little bit more warm. So just a little bit. And I'm going to also pull the green over just a tiny bit. Okay. The next one that I typically do is either brightness and contrast or the hue, saturation, and lightness adjustment. For now, I don't think we need to play with them too much because we've already adjusted the brightness and the levels adjustment. The Vibrance saturates selective colors. The cloudy weather does dull your picture a little bit, so I'll pull the Vibrance bar a little bit to the right to bring back some of that vibrance. And another adjustment layer is shadows and highlights. So this highlight bar it's very easy to go overboard. You can see quickly that it can quickly blow out colors. So your highlights can actually be very blown out and you actually lose detail. So it's easy to go overboard on the highlights. I would say try to, once you start seeing your lighter areas lose detail, like at this point here, I would say definitely pull back. So for my highlights, I don't need it too strong. So 35% is good. And shadows is a neat thing because it identifies the mid-tone or darker values. So it's a selective adjustment layer. So for example, if I wanted to increase the shadows all the way at the max, you can see it makes a small difference in the areas around Craig's eyes, the tip of his beak, and his shadow and his nails. But at the maximum shadow setting, it's still not making the whole picture dark. It just selectively chooses the mid to dark tone areas and deepens them slightly. So I really enjoy using the shadow adjustment, but his shadows aren't quite that dark, so it's probably closer to this setting here. So if you're using Affinity, I would recommend going from the top down and only using the adjustment layers you feel are really necessary for your drawing. You don't need to use all the adjustment layers. Typically only 1 to 3 adjustment layers will be suitable for most. It's only in extreme cases, if you were, example, taking an indoor photo with fluorescent lighting, then you might have to get more into the white balance adjustment, the hue, saturation, and lightness adjustment, and playing with the contrast and vibrance. But in this case, I just had to deal with the simple effect of overcast lighting, so I only really had to play with 4. So that was levels, white balance, Vibrance, shadows and highlights. Now let's pull up my photo that I took in daylight as a comparison. So you can have that here. So you can see I'm getting a lot of the range of colors back, but the paper is looking a little bit warmer than it should be, because the paper I know I was drawing with was a mid-tone cool color, and now it's a little bit more on the neutral end. So I'm going to adjust the white balance ever so slightly. So I'm going to minimize my daylight photo, bring up the white balance, and increase the brightness just a tiny bit. Okay, so now let's compare the two again. So now this looks pretty accurate. I do miss, I think the bird as a whole it has a slightly more red tone to him than what it should be in the daylight photo. So what we're going to do is have a adjustment layer just for his body and then not apply it to the background. I'm going to make another adjustment layer. So you can have multiples of each adjustment layer. So I'm clicking at the top to make sure I'm not using the existing adjustment layer. And we're going to go to white balance. And I'm going to pull him more blue and pull him more green. So this is a layer all on its own, so you can see the slight difference. And having that layer selected, I can select the eraser tool. I'll increase the size a little bit to make this easier. Increase the opacity. So if you keep an eye on this little preview window of the white balance adjustment layer at the top, I'm going to start erasing around his body, so that will make the filter only apply to him. So I'll be erasing. And you can see the color change very slightly as I'm removing the effect of the adjustment layer on the paper and just allowing it to affect his body. So when we take a look at the preview window, you can see that the black is the area that the adjustment layer is not actively applied to, and the white, which is his little body, is where the white balance adjustment layer is affecting. And so if we pull up our picture again, so it's a little bit, needs a little bit more yellow and a little bit more vibrant. So we can do a little more vibrancy. So same thing with the brightness layer. Now that the paper is a little bit washed out, I'm going to slowly erase the effects of the brightness adjustment on the paper so that the paper is as accurate as I can make it. And so having your eraser opacity set to something that's below 50% is really nice, so you can have a very smooth transition between where the adjustment layer begins and ends. So I think now that we have those two things nailed down, you can see how much of a difference that made. So it's pretty close to the sunlight picture, not exactly, but it's much better than it was before. So if we go take all of these layers, I'm going to group them for you so that we can just minimize them. So you can see what a big difference that made between the original and the adjustment. So this still isn't quite exactly what I would want to share with the internet, because there are some parts of Craig's body that do need, a little bit finessing. But if you were to share this picture on the internet, it probably wouldn't receive as much attention as this picture because it clearly shows a lot of the highlights and fine details that are washed out when the picture was taken in the shade. So it is worth doing some color adjustments on every photo you take. It doesn't have to be as extensive as this one where you're using 6 different adjustment layers. Just a few minor tweaks can definitely help out your picture. I know on Instagram they do have about 10 different adjustment aspects that you can change, and so Instagram does a pretty good job. If you just want to post your pictures to Instagram, it's definitely worth it to go through the few extra minutes and do that. If you are dealing with larger photos that you'd like to upload to your website or show clients especially, you do want to make sure that the file you're sending is as accurate to the actual drawing as possible. Again, because if you intentionally distort colors that make it way better than it should be or way worse, that's not putting your artwork in the best light. So you want to make sure your adjustment layers accurately reflect your drawing, not make it look better than your drawing. I will have another video coming up in the next week giving a tour of my art closet. So if you're interested in seeing how I store all of my art supplies, in the next couple days I'll have that video up for you. And if you'd like to subscribe and see more videos from me, you can subscribe, hit the notifications. I do have a whole playlist of drawing tutorials if you'd like to check those out, and I am also trying to do more editing tutorials like this where you can see some of the post-production things that I do that often get overlooked. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.